Hi guys, how's it going? Ivano here, and today we are talking about the Rage Juggernaut for PvP in Star Wars: The Old Republic patch 7.4. As always, there's also a written version of this guide available, so if you prefer to read, link to that is in the description below. So Rage is of course a melee DPS, which has some of the best single target damage in the game, but not only that, it's also one of the best classes for supporting your teammates, keeping your healers alive. Has a bunch of taunts, it has of course intercede and force choke, so one of the few classes that didn't lose hard stun in 7.0. And of course, as all Juggernauts and Guardians, it also has force push. So Rage is your classic builder spender combat style, which revolves around your auto crit Raging Burst and then the key fillers that reduce its cooldown. For your tactical, you are going to be running Cauterized Coronary, which is actually a Marauder tactical that also works for the Rage Juggernaut. It boosts your single target DPS by adding a damage over time effect to Furious Strike. And while this tactical is not as impactful for your overall damage output as some other tacticals for other classes, looking at the Vengeance Jugs Cut to Pieces for example, single target is the biggest strength of Rage. So I prefer running Cauterized Coronary over something like Enraged Crush for example. Just gives you a little bit more single target sustained DPS. The Grit Teeth crafted tactical will reduce the cooldown of Saber Ward by 2 seconds when you get attacked, and in combination with the Nimble Master package, this can be a very viable option if you want to boost your survivability. The best legendary implant is Champion's Precision, which grants you an extra 20% critical hit chance for 8 seconds after using Enrage. With the build we are running, which I will explain in a second, you will have this buff active very frequently, which means you should expect to crit between 60 and 70% of your total attacks. For your second legendary, I recommend running Fearless Victor. The 10% extra melee damage can make for some juicy crits on Furious Strike or Vicious Throw, and since it activates on any rage spending ability, you can always have this buff up. Nimble Master is a good choice if you need some extra mobility. The 100% extra movement speed means you can run away from a bad situation or chase after a sorcerer or sniper while your Saber Ward is active. It synergizes well with the Grit Teeth tactical and can be your best option when you are being targeted first, both in war zones and arenas. And when running Nimble Master, you replace Fearless Victor because Champion's Precision adds more to your overall DPS. For your gear, you want to get your Alacrity rating to around 2150. That's 3 Alacrity enhancements, or 2 if you're running Nimble Master instead of Fearless Victor, and then 3 Superior or Golden Augments with Alacrity. Since some of your biggest hitters are white damage, we will be running 5% accuracy. To reach that, equip 1 accuracy enhancement, 2 augments, and the advanced Kirprax Proficient Stim. Once you have that, you want to get your critical rating to around 4800. Your high critical hit chance makes the bonus critical damage you get from critical rating even more valuable, and on top of that, Rage of course gets a bunch of extra critical damage from the level 15 passive called Shicho Mastery. For the Warzone build, you typically want to pick up Dark Synergy at level 23 for an extra 15% critical hit chance for 6 seconds after using Raging Burst. This synergizes well with your Champion's Precision implant and the 4.8k critical rating, and is overall the best option for sustained DPS. I don't run Subjugate since it nerfs your single target DPS, and Smash is still better for AoE in most situations. At level 27, Projected Scream is a little more AoE damage and a 50% slow, but Overwhelming Slashes gives you 3-second root on Ravage, which comes in handy when locking down an enemy healer or range DPS. Level 39, Rage Engine reduces the cooldown of Enrage by 3 seconds, which means higher uptime on your Champion's Precision and overall higher DPS. At level 43, in my opinion, Domination is by far the best option for PvP. It makes it so critical hits with force attacks, which is basically every yellow damage hit you have except for the bleed from Cauterized Coronary, reduces the cooldown of Enrage by 1 second. But more importantly, it enables Enrage to purge all movement impairing effects, of which there are plenty in PvP. And for this reason alone, Domination is already the better choice over Indignant Rumination. because you can't do damage if you are rooted or slowed. But on top of that, Domination also boosts your burst damage by allowing the Domination proc effect, which is the auto crit buff you get after Force Charge or Obliterate, to stack twice. And this means that combining Force Charge and Enrage, or Obliterate plus Enrage plus Raging Burst, gives you a super crit of sometimes more than 100k, or even more in the right conditions. Level 51, Warmonger lets you use Vicious Throw after every Force Charge, and also reduces the cooldown of Force Charge when you get hit. Level 64, we pick up War Master, because it makes you immune to CC and grants you a 20% damage reduction for 4 seconds after using Force Charge. Really strong and has a great synergy with Warmonger. At level 68, I prefer Mad Dash for the extra mobility, but you can also take Saber Reflect if you are being targeted a lot. And finally, on 73, Pooled Hatred is very strong. It gives you up to 50% extra damage on your next rage consuming ability after being movement impaired. This will even work on slows, so a sorcerer channeling Force Lightning on you will stack it up pretty quickly, which you can then use for some insanely big Raging Burst hits. For arenas, you will usually be the first target, and because of that we are making some changes to the build. Level 23 Dark Synergy is also good for arenas, but you can consider going for Unrelenting Rage as well. The 15% extra damage on Raging Burst is nice, but the 20% trauma debuff makes it much easier to get that all-important first kill, especially if there's a healer on the enemy team. 39 for arenas, we pick up Seething Defense. The little shield on Obliterate is not huge, but since we are going to be the first target most of the time, we need every bit of survivability we can get. Level 68, Saber Reflect makes you immune to single target ranged force and tech attacks for 5 seconds and reflects a part of it back at the attacker. This is best if you plan to stand and fight and eventually die as you run out of cooldowns. But if you plan to use Nimble Master and make a run for it, you can instead go for Mad Dash, just as in the Warzone build. For the final choice, you can try to go through Passion, which reduces the cooldown of Enraged Defense from 2 to 1.5 minutes. That makes it so you can sometimes live until your Enraged Defense comes off cooldown. So this combo is how you usually want to start the fight. Of course, you cannot always follow this fixed rotation in PvP, because PvP is dynamic, people kite, they use defensives, so you will need to react and change your combos to counter your opponents. But in general, you want to start the fight with Force Charge to get your Dominate buff, as well as the CC immunity and damage reduction from War Master. Next, pop Enrage and Raging Burst, which will be a massive auto crit because of the 2 Dominate stacks and the crit buff from Champion's Precision Implant. Ideally, you always want to use Furious Strike directly after Raging Burst. Both abilities should be off cooldown at the same time, as long as you have something to hit in between to reduce the cooldown of Raging Burst. Next, we use our Vicious Throw from Warmonger, follow that up with Obliterate, which reduces the cooldown of Enrage and provides a Dominate stack for your next Raging Burst. Then we use Force Scream, and only now you Force Crush to make use of the level 73 Fuming Rage passive, which makes your next Furious Strike free, as long as you use it within the next 2 global cooldowns. So once this combo is done, use the Raging Burst plus Furious Strike combo again, and then make sure you use Force Charge or Obliterate and Enrage before your next Raging Burst is available. In general, you always want to use either Enrage or Force Crush before a Raging Burst, so it's good to alternate them. Some gameplay tips. Intercede can be used as a gap closer, and it also purges roots. Second tip, remember that Enraged Defense can be used while you are stunned. Third, Mad Dash makes you immune to most damage if you time it right. And the fourth tip, and I think this is what sets apart the good from the bad Juggernaut players, use your leap as often as you can to get the CC immunity, damage reduction, and Dominate buffs. So if you are fighting in melee range, you can combo it with Mad Dash to create the necessary distance, but don't necessarily stick to a target for the whole fight. You want to leap around a lot to keep those buffs active. Easy classes to face as Rage Juggernaut are Hatred Assassins, because they can't burst you down. Their dots will guarantee that you get all the ticks of Enraged Defense. and they are so squishy that you can kill them before they even have applied all of their dots. Just make sure you don't Raging Burst into their shroud. You can also counter their deflection with Forced Choke, since a target cannot defend against attacks when they are stunned. But don't waste your stun if the assassin runs the CC immunity, and remember that this buff lasts for half the duration of deflection. Mercenaries are also relatively easy to face. While Electronet is annoying, they are still easier to stick to compared to sorcerers and snipers. You can leap to them, which makes you immune to their knockback, and many mercs will waste it into your CC immunity, and then you just start wailing on them. Of course, you don't want to hit into their defensive cooldowns, but once they are down, you will usually win the DPS race against the merc. Hard classes to face include sorcerers. They have so many kiting tools that they can just walk you around the warzone like a dog. It is best to open on them with Force Charge to counter the backlash bubble stun, and then if they force speed away, use Choke to counter it. That should force them to use either their CC break or Face Walk, which means you will have gained an advantage in the fight. Nevertheless, you should not be able to ever kill them 1v1 unless they make a mistake. Similar to sorcerers, snipers are hard to face because they will kite you. A good sniper will always be in cover, which negates your Force Charge. Entrench makes it so you cannot use Force Push or Choke against them either. And if they play Engineering, the permanent AoE slow from Plasma Probe is the bane of every melee in the game. Try to outplay them by fake running away and then leaping to them as they leave cover to chase after you. Mad Dash and Intercede are your best gap closers. Also remember to save Enrage for the root break in this matchup. The best classes to play with Rage Juggernaut are really any of the healers, since they provide some much needed sustain, meaning you can stay in combat longer. Another good combination of classes would be Rage with any of the Marauder specs for a warrior melee death ball. Predation makes you able to chase down range classes and also gives you some extra defense chance, which is very welcome. So that's all for this guide. If you have a question, let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.